Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 40, the chronological read through the Bible. Today's commentary covers Exodus chapter 25 through 28. Now, if you've read this passage today, you'll see it's speaking of the beginnings of the tabernacle being built, God giving the specifications as to how each element or each article inside the tabernacle is to be built. Now, we also understand in how this lays out that God had given Moses even more specific instructions when he was on the mountain. So many times we just see the phrase, as I showed you on the mountain. And so this is for our benefit, but then you say, well, why do I need to know this? Let me give you this picture. The tabernacle and its layout and its ordinances, its structure, and our interaction is laid out in around 50 chapters throughout the entirety of the scriptures. The creation of this earth was only 2 chapters. So this has a major significance, and I just want to outline for you a few little aspects that it's good to soak in and understand these passages, not necessarily in detail, but to understand that this is very important. You don't have to understand every aspect of the layout of the tabernacle at this point, but it is good going forward to have an appreciation for the tabernacle and later the temple. But if you understand how the tabernacle is laid out, you'll understand how the temple will be laid out. They will be a picture of each other. The tabernacle, of course, is being built to basically be a tent, to be mobile. That's why the elements or the furniture within the tabernacle all have poles on them, so they can be carried from place to place and moved until the Hebrews enter into the promised land. Yet we never see any instruction as the poles being removed from the tabernacle or later the temple furniture. And I think a part of that is the aspect of reminding us that we are all pilgrims destined for a greater place. We are headed to the celestial city, to heaven. Now, let's take the Ark of the Covenant in particular. The Ark was the place where the atonement for the sins of the people would be made once a year. The high priest, as we're going to see later in the instruction, but just to highlight it here, the high priest will go into the tabernacle once a year on the Day of Atonement, and he will place blood on the lid, on the mercy seat of the ark. Now, here's another one for you, and I wish, especially in the New Testament scriptures, they had just translated it mercy seat. But we get this big word that you only use really if you're in the Bible, is propitiation. And that is basically the same word in Greek, which in the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, and this was written around the time of the Greeks having taken control of Israel and Egypt, and at the time of Alexander the Great. So this is short, brief history. So the Greek word used for mercy seat there is later the same one that'll be translated to what we see as propitiation, but you don't use that word. So it is the mercy seat of that Ark of the Covenant, where the angels, their faces are facing down towards the lid. Now that lid's solid gold, whereas the rest of the ark, or box for lack of better wording, is just, it's acacia wood, and then gold is layered on the outside of it and on the inside of it. But these angels are facing this spot where the high priest would take this bowl of blood and dip his finger in it and drop it onto the lid to show that man's sins are being atoned for. Now, before that, the angels are looking at the lid, and inside the Ark of the Covenant are the 10 Commandments, the commandments which man was breaking and not fulfilling. So now they're not seeing the commands, they're seeing the blood, the atonement. This is the picture that we have there. I want to jump way forward to John chapter 20. And John chapter 20, it says in verse 11, "But Mary was standing outside the tomb weeping. And so, as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been laying." You see, this is probably a bigger picture here than Mary realized, because this is showing now that where Christ had laid, and likely blood was still on that part, having seeped through the wrappings that he had been wrapped in. This is now the mercy seat, sort of a picture of that. So there we have the ark, and then I want to mention the table of showbread. This is the table that's been given ordinance to be made and placed. Now, there's the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant was, and the other furniture implements of the tabernacle are going to be in the holy place, right before the curtain dividing the two. Now, priests went into the holy place on a daily sojourn. This is where they would go to the altar of incense and burn incense, and the table of showbread was there, which had, if you can kind of picture it, it is like had a stack of 6 pita bread on one end and 6 pita bread on the other end, and this was the bread that had been made to represent each of the tribes, and that was placed there. Now, I want to again go forward. When David is on the run with King Saul pursuing him, he ends up going to the priest and asking for food, and he is eating the showbread off that table. That's what's being taken. So we're going to see this story later, but the reason why I point this out here is because I want you to understand the significance of the things that we're seeing outlined here in today's passage of Scripture. We're going to see them throughout the Bible time and time again, just like when the ark is captured by the Philistines, and we will see Eli when he receives the news of this. He falls off of his stool because he was shaken at the news of his 2 sons having died, but when he hears of the ark having been captured, that's when it's overwhelming to him. And he falls off of his stool and breaks his neck. And he dies as well. So we are seeing some of the importance of this. And then the altar of incense, which is also in the holy place. Remember, this would be the altar that Isaiah envisioned himself, or was before, when he had his vision in Isaiah chapter 6. It's also the same when Zechariah, John the Baptist's father, is in the temple, and he is performing the sacred duty of burning the incense, that he had been chosen by Lot that day to go in and burn incense on that altar, when he suddenly has his encounter with an angelic being, and telling him that he and his wife Elizabeth will give birth to a son in their old age. So when you can picture the importance of these implements, these articles, then you see, well, wow, this throughout Scripture, they'll hold some significance. So I just want to encourage you that over the next few chapters, each time you hear of the tabernacle being mentioned, each time you read of the the elements there, you can hold to the significance of them and notice them throughout scriptures. They also are pointing to the new heavens, and they're pointing to what we will encounter in heaven. So it's like you have the bronze basin that was made for the priests to cleanse themselves in, to wash their hands in. And in heaven, that picture is the crystal sea. Because you see, they won't need to be cleansing themselves because they will be cleansed. So the sea, the water, has turned to solid crystal. So it's not meaning, I know in one sense you could think, well, crystal means that it's clear. It's a crystal clear sea. I think that it's meaning that it's solid. It is like, well, you're not going swimming in there because you're not going to have a need to cleanse yourself. So just wanted to give you those pictures. Another thing is when we see how the tabernacle is placed, it's facing east. And the first tribe, the tribes are going to encamp around the tabernacle, and the first tribe approaching the one door in the tabernacle, only one door to enter into it, but the first tribe is the tribe of Judah, which is the tribe which Christ comes out of. So again, it's this picture, giving us this picture of what's to come, that you will have to pass through the tribe of Judah, or a son of the tribe of Judah, Christ, in order to get to that one door to enter. And of course, I need to mention this. It speaks of, this dividing curtain between the Holy of Holies and the holy place. And of course, on the day of Christ's crucifixion, that curtain is torn in two from the top to the bottom, and revealing the Ark of the Covenant to all people, showing that all have access. Now, I know that's where some would say, well, was the Ark even there when Christ was? Had to be there, or otherwise the temple in Jerusalem held no significance whatsoever, and the curtain being torn in two would have just been like, well, where's the Ark? So it is opening up to show man that we now, as believers, through the blood of Christ, have access to the most holy place. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope that this passage, I realize it's just showing a lot of different elements and a lot of details that you may say, what's their importance? Their importance is that we're going to see the significance of them repeated over and over and over, even down to the lampstand. Of course, there's the festival of Hanukkah, which oftentimes is left not even being discussed in the church. But in John chapter 10, we see Christ at the day or feast of dedication. That is the celebration of Hanukkah. So he even recognized that. And in John chapter 8, that's when he also makes a statement. This is around the Feast of Booths, but going into the Festival of Lights, or the Festival of Hanukkah, when he makes mention of saying, I am the light of the world. And many times the great menorah, the great lampstand, was referred to as the light of the world. I do hope that you enjoyed this passage of Scripture today. Until tomorrow, God bless.